Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on decision model and notation, hype trend or truly meaningful. If any questions happen to come up during the course of the webinar, you can type them up and send them to us at any point in time. We'll go over them at the end if there's any time left, and if not, we'll address them over email in the next following days. It's important to know, relating to the questions, that any questions that you might type will not display your name, as all the participants in today's webinar are listed as anonymous. Only the host and the presenter's name will be made visible. Last but not least, this webinar is going to be recorded, and the link to the recording will be sent to you by email in case you ever want to watch it again. Without further ado, let me introduce myself and our presenter for today. My name is Michael Kambroff, and I'm a sales consultant in the Vienna office of the BOC Group, and I'll be your host for today. Our speaker is Tom Brennan. Tom is a part of our global business development team, and he's based in the Irish office of the BOC Group. He's a senior consultant and an expert in BPM and enterprise architecture, and as such, he'll be able to give you a very good overview as well as some beginning analysis of DMN. Once more, we'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Before jumping into today's topic, let me give you some background information about our company as well as some facts and figures. So the BOC Group was founded in 1995 as a spin-off of the University of Vienna and is now today a leading international manufacturer of software tools for globally recognized management approaches. Through constant innovation and improvement of our established processes, we ensure the strong continuity of development of both our software and our services. The BOC Group is headquartered in Vienna, Austria, but it spans its operations worldwide through offices in Germany, Spain, Ireland, Greece, Poland, France, and Switzerland. Beyond that, being able to address the needs of our clients from outside of Europe and all over the world, we have a very broad partner network of now over 90 partners in more than 25 countries. We have over 1,000 clients in more than 50 countries from all over the world and a growing user community of now more than 85,000 people. Over the years, we have managed to execute more than 35,000 successful installations as well as more than 5,000 projects within our partner and our client network. The BOC Group is represented by two major products, and those are ADONIS, focusing on business process management, and ADOIT, which focuses on enterprise architecture. Both products offer also comprehensive functionalities that relate to governance, risk, and compliance, GRC, which as a field on its own offers methods and mechanisms for the evaluation and analysis of the risk portfolio of your company. GRC is a module which can be used both in ADONIS and ADOIT. Our products can operate both on-premise and as a software as a service type of a license. And if you want to find more information about the particular licensing structure, you can find that on our website. Beyond our products and extending into our consulting services, in the following management areas displayed, the BOC Group happens to be not only a tool manufacturer but also quite an experienced consulting company. So other than our products, we also offer extensive consulting services as well as trainings and coachings. The products of the BOC Management Office that are used usually in base scenarios to model business processes, process maps, or enterprise architectures can simultaneously be used to document and maintain the risk portfolio and the application landscape of your organization. And with that, ADONIS and ADOIT are also able to extend with the GRC module and address any governance, risk, and compliance topics. So just as an example, any stakeholders within the organization that might be responsible for the GRC can be interested in whether or not the firm is compliant with different ISO standards for production companies, or Basel III, Solvency II for banks and insurance companies, as well as any other legal standards for various industries and businesses. With the GRC module that you can use with both ADONIS and ADOIT, the GRC responsibles can truly address those needs and requirements and fulfill their own responsibilities. What's more, the different roles and stakeholders from the organization usually have different responsibilities, naturally, and those responsibilities vary based on the process architecture and the repository and the involvement of each user within each of those elements. But every user and every stakeholder is basically able to conduct multiple evaluation and analysis techniques within the tools in order to assist the GRC process to better manage risk and effectively exercise compliance measures, as well as to be able to prepare the company for audits. Today's webinar on DMN falls within 5 out of the 6 categories of BOC webinars for 2017. We'll provide you with more information about these topics and the related webinars at the end of today's session. With that, now I would like to conclude my introduction and Without any further ado, I will now pass on the mic to our presenter for today, Tom, who will start with today's topic. Thank you very much, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Michael, for the introduction. I would also like to welcome all participants to today's webinar. And in this session, we will introduce the standard from the OMG group, namely DMN, and see how we have implemented it in ADONIS MP together with our BPMN Fit for Business approach. So what exactly is DMN? Well, the primary goal of the decision model and notation is to provide a common notation that's kind of easily understandable by all business users, from the business analysts who need to create initial decision requirements and more detailed decision models, right down to the technical developers who are responsible for actually automating the decisions and processes, and then finally to the business people who need to manage and also monitor all decisions that take place. So DMN really tries to create a standardized bridge to close the gap between business decision design and also decision implementation. So in terms of today's agenda, we're going to have a quick introduction and then talk about how we approach the concept of integrating BPMN with DMN and ADONIS before looking at a quick example directly in the tool. So there are many application areas or kind of management scenarios that can be used within an organization just to manage an organization that can all be kind of integrated back to your business process management initiative with the objective of kind of avoiding silos being created. So we can look at it from, strategic process management to key performance indicator management, or even governance, risk and control, as Mike mentioned in the beginning. But for decision modeling today, we're just going to focus on the kind of classic process documentation. So if we consider the same approach for processes kind of as a whole, and we can take a look at the different levels that are defined within a model-driven architecture approach, where we're looking at a business workflow and maybe execution graph. And from our scenario overview, we can focus again here on classic process documentation and see what we need to really consider at each of the various levels. So at the business level, we must describe the processes from a kind of a very high level. So here we're working with the kind of business or the descriptive graph, looking further and trying to breaking the process down further into an operational process. It's more focused on kind of being able to analyze the process in more detail through adding more kind of technical information around the process. And finally, with process automation, and we end up with the execution graph, where by using kind of defined interfaces, the process is then deployed and executed in a workflow engine, which actually then kind of runs in real time, so to speak. So, but the detail that's required from a documentation perspective will obviously be based on your focus, the focus of your initiative. So whether you're focusing at a kind of a business or workflow or at an execution level. But we can apply the same kind of logic and classifications to the various kind of decisions that we come across. There's different types of decisions that need to be managed differently based on their kind of level of granularity. Decision modeling is carried out by your typical business analysts in order to understand and also define all decisions that are used within a business or an organization. And such decisions are typically kind of operational decisions made in kind of day-to-day business processes. But we can think of three different uses of DMN in this context. So at the business level, it's more for modeling human decision making. So the decisions in this case are typically described as quite a high level, using kind of natural language rather than decision logic. At the workflow level, it's more about modeling the kind of requirements needed for automated decision making. And here the documentation is entirely prescriptive rather than descriptive, and there's more of an emphasis placed on the actual detailed decision logic, because at the end of the day it needs to be passed through to the execution level for actually implementing automated decision making, where all of the decisions and all of the business knowledge models are fully specified using kind of decision logic. So it then becomes possible to actually execute the decision models that have been defined. So some typical questions for decisions that may be asked at the different levels of granularity are from the business level. You may need to decide who can sign off on maybe a loan with the value of more than 500,000 euro if you're talking about a kind of a banking example. So really the business level questions are there to try and understand a little bit of a background for a decision. For modeling at the workflow level, you have to ensure that all kind of instantiations of a decision and all variants are covered. It's here where we introduce some kind of more structured approaches or kind of more defined formalisms that need to be followed, meaning that there's basically some form of logic in your head that you need to apply. So this logic could also come from external documentation, maybe like an Excel document, for example, where you could have maybe discount levels or pricing models directly built into the document, and that's then just applied on the decision. But at the execution level, the decisions and the questions will be defined and implemented in the actual kind of code that's developed, and all decisions here have already been analyzed in detail at the workflow level, so they'll all then be included directly in the runtime environment. So why do we need to do this? Any model, whether it's a business process model or a decision model, really needs to have a kind of a purpose. So if we take a look at some application areas of the various models, we can see that at the kind of business level, and the models can be used here for kind of work instructions or training, or really to try and increase the kind of transparency and traceability of your operations. But at the more operationally targeted level, at the workflow level, we're focusing here around kind of optimization and maybe specification before we get to the final kind of execution level, where again you're more involved in validation and actual workflow execution to implement the processes and all of the decisions in a more automated system. But who's involved in actually defining and designing both the processes and the kind of decision points? At the business level, it's obviously the business users who will benefit from the kind of business processes at a high level. The project team members or maybe process experts will be more involved at a workflow level, and then it's down to your kind of IT guys and implementation team and kind of IT management who will be more interested in the decisions and processes from an execution perspective. Okay, and now we just want to look at how kind of decisions are mapped and actually handled at the three different levels that we've defined. So there's different ways of mapping the decisions based on the perspective. Here at the business level, we can graphically model the decisions. So for example, in ADONIS, we have our BPMN fit for business approach as the method that we use to model processes and decisions. So in this case, the kind of rules and decisions typically relate to the text that is found in the description of the previous activity or the previous kind of series of activities. So the descriptions could also be maintained externally from the process in kind of attached documents. So, but here it's not kind of formalized, it's only using kind of descriptive and actual textual format, so there's no formal representation for it. So at the workflow level then, we're moving more into the kind of analytical world, and at this level, decision model isn't kind of something new, so it's been kind of around as long as BPMN or BPM has been in the market. So, but the difference now is that we have a kind of an international standard which aims to kind of harmonize how we actually do decision modeling. So that's what we now have DMN for. So we could have detailed decision-making activities in a separate sub-process, again, using kind of BPMN fit for business or through the use of business rules. And at the execution level, we can map decisions using explicit kind of control systems or rule models or more kind of structured formalisms that allow you to kind of use an execution engine to then run everything automatically with the individual kind of code programming of the actual decision trees directly as well. Okay, so now just moving on to our approach. So again, DMN comes from the Object Management Group, and the latest release was version 1.1 from last June. The objectives, as mentioned at the beginning, it's really a kind of a uniform notation for kind of business rules, but it's also complementary to BPMN, which is why we're able to kind of manage this approach directly in ADONIS. And they've also tried to define a kind of an exchange format as well, so to provide kind of execution support for the various rule engines that we find on the market as well. So when we look at the DMN, and in any kind of decision design, there has to be an element of kind of context added to the decision. So context could be that the decision is used within a business process, but also things like the domain or its application and its structure are also important. And any decision that is found in DMN is then made up of two levels. So we've got the decision requirements level, first of all, which takes an input based on the defined context, and then identifies the necessary inputs, outputs, hierarchies, and any dependencies that are there. And then on the decision logic level, we then control the execution of the rules and their expressions that actually just determine the outcome of any decision. So the decisions are then implemented and kind of executed at the kind of lower level, but our focus today, and especially within ADONIS MP, is more focused on the kind of top part, dealing with the inputs, working out kind of logically how to deal with them, and then finally providing kind of an output back to the contextual elements to actually digest further. So taking a look then at an example where BPMN 2.0 business process is the context, in this case for DMN. So as you can see in this simple process, we have one decision to make to either accept or decline a request. So in this case, we focus on the task that occurs right before the decision tree here in our process, and we can see here that there's a decision table associated with the task. So it's the little icon here on our decide routing task, where the process information is then handed over to the rule set, digested, and then it outputs a variable to the decision point where the request is either accepted here or declined, as you can see on the model. So when we look at the decision from the two perspectives I've mentioned, the inputs are required on the decision kind of requirements level have been defined hierarchically here, and then on the decision logic level, where you can see the tables here, which actually contain the rules in the green boxes here, based on the kind of input values for the defined decision. The rules are then applied on the decision inputs. The input values are shown here within the blue boxes, and the red is the actual output. And then each row within this eligibility rules decision table represents a decision that can be taken. So here around eligibility, we're looking at the employment status of the individual, what country they're from, and the age. So there's an individual row to identify the three elements that make up the decision. Okay, so we've already discussed the kind of objectives of DMN, but I wanted to mention kind of our objectives for implementing a solution to support DMN and ADONIS MP. We wanted to be able to support kind of the experts in modeling and describing the rule sets together with the BPMN fit for business approach, being able to then realize the model's value in terms of the functionality we can provide, like just managing the models, verification, validation of the various rule hierarchies and so on, and then also providing an open interface for kind of interchange between the kind of rule engines as well. Okay, so how do we model this in the tool, and what kind of elements do we already know from our meta model? Here we have an example of a decision requirements diagram, and at the decision kind of requirements level, we can see how the set of decisions kind of depend on each other, what input data there is, and if there's any business knowledge models associated. And a decision, as you can see here, requires one or more kind of inputs in order to execute the rules and produce an output. But an input can also be the result of another decision or any set of input data elements. But there needs to be at least one knowledge source, so we need to know any kind of information that's required to actually make the decision. But a knowledge source can be anything like maybe a subject matter expert or an actual physical document. But we also have to have some knowledge from the business, which is then provided in a more formal way in things like decision tables or a more analytical model that actually describe how the decision should be taken. And then in the context of BPMN or BPM, and this is integrated with our BPMN fit for business approach, we can see that the decision here is referenced by a task object, but the task type just needs to be changed to a business rule task. And then KPIs can also affect the decision's outcome. as well as we need to apply some context from the organizational level, as the decision makers and decision owners are also involved in the actual definition and execution of any decision. So this is what some of the basic elements look like according to the DMN standard. We can see the basic elements, and we see that the decision sits there as the kind of middle point between the input data and the business knowledge. We don't explicitly define any of the outputs here because the outputs are based on the kind of rule sets applied in the decision tables. But we can see that there's knowledge sources through kind of knowledge models that also control decisions, and examples of the kind of knowledge sources here could be, you know, a kind of a policy document or specific legislation. There's also a number of ways of visualizing the relations between the decision objects and their input data from the various knowledge sources. We can model individual elements here for the inputs, or we can provide a more simplified view where the inputs are modeled directly inside the decision objects. It just depends on the preference of the modeler and the stakeholders. Okay, so we've looked at the decision requirements level, the components which, are really described only using the kind of business concepts, but we also must consider the decision logic level to capture the kind of complete set of business rules and also calculations, and to be able to allow the decision making to actually be fully automated in an execution environment. So at this level we use what are called boxed expressions. So every decision or business knowledge model can be kind of formally described at the logical level as a boxed expression, which is then made up of the value expression here on the left, which specifies how the decision's output is determined as a result of its inputs, and then a decision table, which is how we actually can represent a knowledge model in DMN. So boxed expressions can be then kind of invocation rules, which is represented here kind of in green, and invocation means that, some kind of calculation rules that have been defined here in the value expression. So basically it's telling you how you can actually retrieve a value from a data set. You then perform some kind of calculation on top, and it's all controlled then by using the decision tables which we have seen. So we have inputs and outputs, and then the P here is about the kind of hit policy, which is basically saying how each decision rule here is being illustrated within the kind of single line of the table, where all the parameters are then defined in the decision rules and applied to the specific case to then give you the result of the decision. So as I mentioned in the kind of simple process we saw earlier, the applicant is only eligible, so it'll only return eligible here if each of these decisions here are correct. So the person needs to be employed from the UK and over 18 in order to be kind of eligible as an applicant. So in our ADONIS MP, we can then provide an integrated view based on our platform and its kind of meta modeling approach. Here we can see our standard meta model in ADONIS MP, which includes our BPMN fit for business approach. So to implement the DMN standard, we have just extended the meta model and included the required model types, objects, and relations to then support decision modeling using the boxed expressions that we've just talked about. So the typical functionality that delivers value in ADONIS MP also supports the decision modeling approach, so we can generate analysis views like matrix views to illustrate the relations in the kind of meta model and the repository between tasks and decision models and the organizational part as well. We can support the validation of the decision models based on the defined syntax rules. We can introduce release workflow for decision models, personalized dashboards, and also support the open interfaces for importing, exporting, and also publication of the results. So now we're going to just jump directly into the tool and take a look at how the decision models look in ADONIS MP. So I'll just log in here. So this is the latest version of ADONIS MP, and we can log in here to the Design and Documents portal, and I've got an example here. So we can firstly take a look at the example sales process that we saw in the slides. So again, we're focusing around here on the decision point, and we can see that this task to decide the routing has the little table icon on top. So we're deciding what happens in this decision point based on the decision tables and the value expression that's being defined in this task. So in order to change the task type, we can just double click on the notebook, and we go to the object properties, and we see here that the task type has been changed to a business rule. And we can see there's a whole number of different task types that we can call within BPMN 2.0, but it's just been extended to include a business rule. And then in order to actually relate it to our decision model, we can see here in the details chapter under our business rule that the reference decision is this decision called, if I just close this for a sec, our routing decision. So our reference decision here is made directly in the notebook of this task. And then just to take a look and see what that decision model looks like, we can take a look here. So directly inside we have our decision model also. That is the example taken from the slide. So we have our decision here about routing. We have our input and our decision that needs to be taken about eligibility. We can see there's a knowledge source here about the eligibility rules, which is supported by the decision table, and the decision table is also related to this value expression, and together it becomes a kind of a boxed expression then to actually generate the result that we talked about, where an applicant here is actually eligible if they're employed from the UK and over 18. Okay, so if we just take a look at more maybe complex process that could also be a candidate here for decision modeling, is this process that's looking at calculating a discount for a customer. Just zoom in a little bit. So here there are 3 decisions that need attention in this case. So we've got customer loyalty, we've got the purchase amount, and we also have the kind of expected customer longevity if the loyalty is unknown. So basically if it's a new customer, and based on the results of the inputs, then you assign a specific discount to the customer's transaction. So so how could we represent this then in so this is how we represent the decision tree directly in BPMN, but it's also now possible with DMN that we can outsource the logic to a decision model and a kind of calculation rule like this one here. So it's a little bit more complex because we have more decisions. So here we also have the kind of order as the input to this special discount object for the decision. But we can also see that there's knowledge inputs that are associated with our other 3 decisions, taking into account the customer's order history and the customer churn likelihood, and also then some sales guidelines are actually influencing the top level decision as well. And so what does this actually then mean for our business process model? If we take a look at our business process now, we can see that as a result it would only be made up of 2 tasks, where one being the task of type business rule, which now points to our decision model for the special discount. So again, we check the object properties, we can see it's a task type business rule, and in the details we're linking back to our special discount DMN model here. So it just basically, as we said, it simply outsources the complexity from one representation being BPMN into then DMN. So from now on, here we can see our process only has 2 tasks. So the other task is to compute the total for the order, and from now on, our BPMN model will simply kind of call or invoke the decision model directly from our business rule task here, decide special discount. Okay, we can also use some of the other functionalities of the ADONIS MP platform to kind of analyze the dependencies and the relationships. So if we take a look at our special discounts decision model here, we can create a matrix maybe to see how this influences, or how it's been influenced, or who's responsible from an organizational perspective. And we can look at a matrix here to see our decision owner and decision maker for each of the decisions in our tree here. So we can see based on the matrix here from an organizational perspective who's actually responsible as the decision owner and also the decision maker for the various decisions found in our decision model. We could apply the same concepts just to give you a kind of a more detailed example, just on a more complex decision model that we have here. We could apply the same matrix and just see the responsibilities from an organizational perspective, but it's just the same matrix configuration. Again, we just see, if I zoom out a little bit, again, it's just all of the decisions found in our decision tree assigned to our various decision makers and decision owners. So that's actually calculated or input here directly in the notebook for the decision, where we can assign a decision maker or a decision owner. Okay, so just jumping back to the slides then, to finish up, I just want to recap on what we talked about earlier. And what I just want to mention here is that there are many ways and kind of contexts where decision modeling and the DMN kind of standard applies, but you have to decide, you know, how it should work for you in terms of the kind of level of detail, but also about the relevance of the DMN standard for you. So the end goal or the objective is also really important to keep in mind from the start, because there's, as you saw, there's different levels here. We've got different questions at different levels, but also different application areas. So what are you actually trying to produce at the end, whether you're looking to move towards process automation and decision modeling. But with that, I just want to talk about ADOIS, or the BOC Management Office as a whole, where we're trying to enable business transformation. So together with ADONIS and ADOIT, we can help you to kind of plan and control change, representing your kind of current and target architectures. We've got feedback and collaboration mechanisms to improve cooperation in a more team environment. And we can also do our graphical model comparison. We've seen the graphical views there with the matrix views, but you can also define kind of role-based or really stakeholder-specific dashboard access for the users of our tools. So, and that's the end of today's session. I hope it gave you a kind of a little bit of an insight into what DMN is all about, and also how we've approached the implementation directly in ADONIS MP. But for now, I'd like to pass you back to Michael, who will conclude today's session.
All right. Thank you very much, Tom. Perfect. So as a conclusion, I would like to provide you with an outlook on some of our upcoming webinars. As I said in the beginning of the webinar, the BOC webinars for 2017 fall within the 6 major categories that you can see displayed on top of the slide. And below, you can find 3 of the webinars coming in the next 2 months. The next webinar that we have is scheduled for the 8th of June, and that's going to focus on quality, process, and risk management with ISO certifications and standards. So you'll be able to see how, with ADONIS, you'll be able to implement each of those standards and those requirements within the company. A very big webinar that we have coming up is scheduled for the 8th of July, and that's going to be the What's New in ADONIS MP 5.0 webinar, and it will basically be an overview of all the new features in the latest release of our BPM to ADONIS MP. The webinar following that one is on the 13th of July, and that's going to focus on the optimization of business processes through our methods and best practices. So based on our more than 20 years experience, we'll be able to demonstrate with concrete examples from our practice what we believe to be the best methods and the best practices in the optimization of business processes. For more details, as well as the detailed agenda of each of those webinars, as well as the webinars that we did in the past, you can visit the link on the bottom of this slide. If you're interested in any of our 2 products, so as we saw today, ADONIS MP, as well as ADOIT, which is our enterprise architectural platform, you can find more information on the website, and you can actually see the tools, test them, and even use them. And what I mean by that is that, for example, you can not only find an overview of all the features of the tool, as well as some success stories that we have and references by clients, but you can actually quickly jump in the tool. You can even register for the 30-day free trial or get in touch with one of our consultants to be able to have a personalized demo for your particular needs and requirements, and then get your own offer. If you have any questions and haven't typed them up already, now would be a good time to do that. We will address them and follow up with you via email in the next few days as we're running a bit short in time. If you have any further questions, we're always there for you by phone or by email. If you don't manage to send your question right now, you can also get in touch with us via social media, not only through our website, of course. You can connect with us on the Zing, Twitter, as well as LinkedIn. We would like to thank you for your interest in today's webinar and for your attention, both on behalf of Tom and myself. Thank you, and we hope to be joined by you again soon. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.